Hello, you beautiful people, and my name is Asa Hale, and welcome to the Kelp Bed. Now, if some of you are thinking he looks a touch familiar, well, the reason why may be for years I made my living as a street performing magician, which means I would travel around and perform magic on sidewalks, which was a wonderful way to live, but about 6 years ago I had a stroke, which means sleight of hand is a little bit out of the question nowadays. However, this is how Grendel came into my life. That's what I refer to my stroke hand as, because I used to practice ventriloquism, so I found out that having my hand as Grendel perform a ventriloquist act was a great way to screw a physical therapist. The reason I bring up Grendel is, you like that Vanna White move there? That was pretty sweet, wasn't it? But the reason I bring him up is you'll see me taping everything down as I work on it, because Grendel was an overachiever, so I suffer from both dystonia and spasticity in that hand. So if I asked Grendel to hold something down for me or hold it steady, he would declare it petit bourgeois and throw it across the room. He's punched me a few times in the baby maker, which is not pleasant, but it amuses Kathleen to no end. This also leads to, why did I create the Kelp Bed? And that's because, as you can imagine, I spent a lot of time in bed recuperating between going to physical therapy. You can only watch so much TV before you go slightly bonkers. So that's when I started watching Alfonso Dunn's YouTube tutorials, and I filled up about 3 or 4 sketchbooks doing his exercises, bought both his books. In short, Alfonso is an amazing teacher. I'm constantly impressed by just how much passion he puts into the topic, and I would really like to hear from his students they teach chemistry to. I bet they have amazing feedback. At the same time, I read Justin Durr's wonderful book, The Temple of Silence, which details the work, life, and times of Herbert Crowley, who was an early American cartoon strip artist. This is at a time when the cartoon strip was not codified. It didn't have any set rules, and he created this wonderful symbolist world for people to just indulge themselves in. The book itself is so beautiful, I plan on doing a separate video just to cover it. One thing that's very charming about this, it was months later that I realized Justin Durr was the man behind one of my favorite documentaries, which is called Resurrect Dead, The Toynbee Tiles. I'll put a link to the trailer in that below. The third factor that's involved in this whole expedition is the otter. Now, the otter is the first bona fide and verified resident of the Kelp Bed. Years ago, when my wife and I first started living together, I returned home from DEFCON 8 to find this guy in my bed, and my shoes were not polished. Like all married couples, we have developed a series of inside jokes, turns of phrase, a mythology, if you will. And as more animals were added to what we call the Kelp Bed, they each develop their own personalities, they interact with one another, and it became a worldview unto its own. Now, the otter came into our life because Kathleen had always wanted to work with otters. She was particularly fascinated with sea otters, yet she was told that you had to spend years volunteering at the Seattle Aquarium in order to get a chance to even work with them. Like all such hearsay, that's exactly what it was. Kathleen has now volunteered at both the Seattle and the New York aquariums, spent several, probably hundreds if not thousands of hours caring for and working with otters, and recently she's been working with penguins. So she really loves that, and she gets a lot of great wildlife photography out of this as well. Once I decided to do a comic strip, that led into an even longer journey of learning how to use watercolors, how to set up a strip, how to letter the comics themselves. It just seems like an endless journey that you can just never exhaust all the possibilities. But I went through several YouTube channels in accumulating this knowledge, such as Steve Cronin, Mind of a Watercolorist, the aforementioned Alfonso Dunn. So at the end of the day, I wanted to give back a little bit for all I had received. So I decided to make process videos as I create and work on this strip. In addition to this, all the background music that I create, I'm going to upload to a Bandcamp page and set it to name your own price. So if you enjoy the music or want to use it in your own projects, you can just download it for free. Go ahead and use it. Since the early 90s, I've used FreeBSD and Linux, so everything that you see on this video was created using free open source software. So if you have any questions about that as well, feel free to hit me up on them. With that said, I think I've rambled enough for now. Though my wife will tell you I ramble all the time. But anyways, let's get into it. Thank you guys.
Out here, and you see me laying out tape. This would be because of Grindel. You know, the combination of dystonia and spasticism. He tends to throw things around a bit. He can't help it, you know. It kind of happens. So I use gaffing tape to tape everything down. Now, one tip I'll say on gaffing tape, you want to fasten it to like your leg or something, then lift it off in order to put it back on the paper, because otherwise it's a touch too tacky. Now here, what we got going on is the Ames lettering guide. Jim Rugg did a great tutorial on the Ames lettering guide. Normally though, I would have that lettering guide set at about 4.5. For this series, I had it set at 6. That way, your letter forms come out a little bit taller. And I realize you're not going to be able to see the pencil work on this. I just wanted to show you initially how it's being laid out, and in the future, just going to show you the inking as we are now. Kind of like watching this fast motion, or time lapse I guess I should say, because it appears as if it's coming out of nowhere. It's almost magic. Or that 70s animation vibe. And now here we're using masking fluid. That's to keep areas white. You can paint over it. Area underneath will always be white. Now, thanks to mind of a watercolor, I learned you should never store your masking fluid upright. Store it upside down. That way all the gunk comes in the bottom, and you never want to shake masking fluid. Use a bamboo skewer or something and stir it up to bring it back to its consistency. If you shake it up, you're going to get air bubbles. And now I'm just using a cheap set of brushes to do that, because masking fluid will tend to burn through your brushes, so you want to use a cheaper set. I made sure I get the Princeton Selects, and I'll tell you the truth, only because they have blue handles, so I could tell them apart from the others really quickly. Now I'm just wetting the paper beforehand. This is Steve Cronin. If you have not checked out Steve Cronin's channel, you truly need to. He will give you the fast start into using watercolors. Any errors in this part are strictly my own. Steve Cronin's a wonderful teacher. You should go check out his channel. And I'll give you a pro tip on Steve Cronin's channel. Since he's Australian, turn on the auto-generated subtitles. Those are a hoot. I don't think Steve Cronin knows what YouTube thinks he's saying. What I'm using here is a crumpled up piece of paper towel, just slightly crumpled up, and you press that into your still wet watercolors and pull it out, and that'll give you cloud shapes. And actually, if you're not outlining it, it'll just give you straight up clouds. Another Steve Cronin tip. You probably learned that from Ron Ranson. And mentioning Ron Ranson, there it is. Yeah, I bought Ron Ranson's hate brush. Why? Steve Cronin once again. He doesn't even know me from Adam. Here I am, I'm just hyping him up. He deserves it though, that's a wonderful channel. It's kind of the Australian Bob Ross of watercolors. Once again, time-lapse footage, it's amazing. I mean, look at that. I love how the rocks just come together. And this is the mind of the watercolorist. Another great channel. He was the one that introduced me to neutral tint. Any abuses of neutral tint, entirely my own. Do not blame that man. He is a national treasure. kind of addicted to all the different Payne's grays and Jane's grays, so you'll see that a lot in here.
Hey cats, I just need to interrupt the video here to kind of explain something. When I'm using the feather, we have 2 adopted pigeons. Yeah, I know, it's a Brooklyn thing. But what happened was Sybil kind of adopted himself to our house. He just kind of walked in the front door and wouldn't leave. We eventually found out he was raised to be a wedding release. A lot of people, they use the wrong type of birds in order to do wedding releases and save money, and it sucks for the animal. So he was our first bird, and that's kind of where we learned everything. But eventually we decided he needed a girlfriend. We contacted the Paloma Pigeon Rescue, and she's a racing pigeon that was found on the streets of Hayward, California, which is how she got the name Hayward. And she was injured. She wasn't supposed to ever fly again. So just as I was never supposed to walk again, Hayward was never supposed to fly again. And guess what? She flies all over the place. A little bit clumsy, but she gets it. I'll try to find some photographs or videos to show you guys. I just wanted to explain that. If you see me moving the feather around and I'm like, Sybil's feather is useful, because we do. We live with 2 belligerent pigeons, and they rule the apartment. Thanks.
One of the best uses that Sybil has in this apartment, he provides feathers, and if you don't use a feather for like cleaning up dustings off your drawing and stuff, try it once. So I guess just find one outside if you don't have a bird. Probably the best. I'm not exactly sure how you want to do that. Be nice to birds though, don't be attacking them just for their feathers. And you can see this, I'm just trying to lay in the volume of the shape. Since everything's imaginary, you kind of have to construct it in your head. And this is where Alfonso Dunn's books and his videos are a godsend, because you learn that naturally just going through his program. It's a wonderful series of books and videos. Actually, Alfonso was, like I said, the one that got me into this in the first place. Once again, doing the lettering, and actually the huge influence on me with lettering is Walt Kelly. And Walt Kelly actually hired a letterist to help him with assisting the comic. I'll find out the name for him. I've seen it before, but I don't know. It's somewhere in the collections, I think, because you can't find it online who actually did the lettering for Walt Kelly. But the way Walt Kelly use lettering, and you can't forget Jeff Smith kind of took Walt Kelly's lettering to the next level. So I plan on screwing around with that, but like I said, kind of making this up as I go along. So once again, weighting down the paper, gonna lay some color into it, that way everything bleeds together. If you haven't checked out Hum Off Clint, you should check out her work, because after she talked to Sterner, she really got into less geometric shapes, more messing around with watercolors, how they blend into one another. Fascinating story. But she's a huge influence on, the great thing about watercolors that I find, they take a lot of control out of your hand. It's almost a John Cage chance operation going on. Like here, we're just taking it while it's wet, sprinkling some table salt in, seeing how it reacts with a watercolor. This is a fairly common trick. You'll see another couple of tricks. And this time I actually bought a glue eraser. You can find them in any art supply store. That's also Mind of a Watercolorist. Go check out. He's got a video that's strictly on using resist and watercolors. So you should check that out because it's a great video. It's where I learned a lot of stuff from myself. Not that I'm any great master by any means. I really love this color for Howden. Howden's, I think he was the second one that was on the Kelp Bed. The Otter came first, then Howden came in. As soon as I saw this color, it just matched perfectly, and I was like, that's it. This is what Howden's gonna be from now on. He may have different concentrations of it, like for his nose, but there we go. And once again, I'm just trying to reinforce the idea of volume. And I'm making the deeper colors. In movie making, there's this idea of the line that you don't want to cross. So therefore, characters appear as if they're talking to each other, and you never want to break that line. There is an exception. Lars von Trier will break that line all the time. And he does it a lot in, I believe it's The House at Jack built, just to show how the characters are deranged, the memories might be off. It's a subtle effect, but it's a great effect. I'll probably steal that too in the future. And here we have the otter, original denizen of the Kelp Bed. The goat, if you will. Just so you know, I started turning gray at 16. However, everybody on my mom's side of the family, all the men, they may be great, but they still have their hair, so small favors. By now, you cats know the drill. Same thing, just let you chill out, float away. And here's another little trick. Just take a slightly crumpled piece of cling wrap, saran wrap, whatever you want to call it. Push it down there. Now, obviously with Grendel, I couldn't do that, so that was my beloved's hands that you get to see. Ta-da! Once again, abusing the neutral tint. I just wanted to show, if you look at pictures of sea otters, they kind of have the whitish, grayish head going on, but they have some other underlying fur in there as well, so I don't want to over-render anything. I want, comics and tattoos are kind of the same. You want them to read from across the room, so don't want to go too crazy with the details on. I'll save that for Jim Lee and Izzo. Can you imagine them doing a weekly strip? That'd be hysterical. Now here's the thing, whereas Howden has his main color, the otter is obviously going to be made up of 3 to try to capture that gray, a little bit of light burnt sienna for the head, and then we're going to use, I believe it's burnt umber, it may be raw umber. Burnt umber, bingo! And Renaissance. Great paint. I love Renaissance paint. However, be warned, like if you live in a humid place or slightly hot, since a lot of them are honey based, you're gonna have to keep an eye on mixing them because they'll separate from their binder. And once again, the bamboo skewer comes in handy. Just stick it in the tube and stir it around. Slightly messy job. Sounds a little sexual, but it's not. and totally worth it. Renaissance and Daniel Smith make up the bulk of what I use. And I doubt I will ever get a signature series. I don't think anybody's gonna look at this and be like, yeah, you know what we need? We need this cat to do his watercolor paint selection for us. He's obviously good at going on, because no. And I love watercolors for this, Just do small glazes, laying down very thin washes, let it build up, and if they bleed into each other or whatever, who cares? Follow it down that path. I mean, we'll do a little Bob Ross here. There are no accidents. Happy little accidents. And I didn't realize this, but it's probably subconscious on my part. I think Otter, Howden, and Owl, they entered the Kelp Bed one after another in precisely that order. Could be wrong, though. I like the cabbage. Memory's not so good. And on this panel, I kind of want to do a little Steve Ditko thing. I'm pretty sure all of you bother watching this inane drivel. You know who Steve Ditko is. And in case you don't, go looking. Oh my god, so good. And he didn't do drugs. Totally sober, but you look at it, these abstract geometric backgrounds, and you're like, that cat was way high. Nope. This is starting to look familiar, isn't it? I had a vague idea of what I wanted. I wanted a depth built up, not just a solid black for his background. And once again, don't fear making an accident. Accidents are just avenues for exploration. Like, you will go down a rabbit hole based off an accident that you'll never discover if everything goes according to plan. Or at least that's my excuse. Now, all these colors in here, they're just colors that I had pre-mixed because I believe they call it a rose palette, which is just, it's got a lot of large different sized irregular holes in a porcelain dish. And anytime I need to mix up a color that I know I'm not going to use that much, I'll use the rose palette, mix up the color, let it dry there, and then later on, like, if you have something like this where you just need odd colors or colors you normally wouldn't use, boom, you can just pull it out of there. This is also a benefit. Most of the watercolors I use are transparent or semi-transparent, because if you throw an opaque one into the mix, you're going to get mud. It's just going to be brown. But if all your colors are transparent or semi-transparent, oh, you can be so lazy. And I'm pretty much lazy all the time. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. This one, kind of a Wu-Tang is for the children. Because what you're supposed to do, put the gauze down, do your painting, let it dry, and then lift it up, and the watercolor will have made these amazing web patterns. Well, I got a little impatient, didn't really wait for it to dry, and however, it kind of smudged and brought everything together in the background and gave it a unified whole. So once I discovered that, I decided to just run for it. Once again, bear of limited intelligence and do not fear accidents. It's kind of like how I distrust a cookbook that's clean. Like a good cookbook is going to be dirty because it's used a lot. Same way I distrust people that have perfect sketchbooks. You look at my sketchbooks are a mess. Nah, big surprise there, no? And the other thing about accidents, they're usually reversible. It's very rare that you have an accident you can't correct. And you see me screw up on this, when I'm putting the borders in, I deliberately had it so that the owl's left ear, I had to think about that there because it's reversed. His left ear goes up and it actually crosses the border. And when I laid the borders in, X right over it. But, that's why God made acrylic paint. Covers over a lot of your mistakes. There's probably an Edgar Allan Poe story in there somewhere. Here we go. Yeah, just so excited about the rolling pin. Boom, chopped his ear off. And the rolling pin came free with the glue erasers. And I had to look it up to see what it was. And then I was like, hey, let's try this out. So, yeah, I kind of screwed it up a little bit there. But, learning. And put your mistakes on display because who knows, you might end up falling in love with them. Like, I actually love how rough those borders look. Then again, let's remember, I am a bear of limited intelligence, so do not take anything I say seriously.
And let's do this one. That was pitiful. Okay, everyone, I've used up enough of your time, and you've been more than gracious, so I look forward to talking to you, hopefully within the next week. I intend to bring these out on a weekly schedule. I've rapidly learned that anything I do on video, be it drawing, painting, whatever, it takes 3 times as long as it normally does. Plus, I have to assemble the video, but I've been learning the keyboard shortcuts for Shotcut and everything to try to streamline this process. So, I'll try and make sure that we have regular updates, and once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Have a blessed day. Bye.